Probably the first question you have is why are we making Hershey Kisses like they're posing for a K-pop band? And the answer for that is I have no idea. But I saw this Hershey Kiss on my table, and by see I mean like I was eating it, and I'm thinking, you know what? Let's make a Hershey Kiss tutorial. They're kind of easy to make. There's a lot of procedural stuff going on, and yeah, we can organize them like BTS. So why not? So. Let's start off with a new Blender project. I'm using version 2.92. You can use version anything, I mean, as long as it's come out. Again, I always like to say I don't give a flying fuck what version you use, okay? The only other thing we're gonna need other than Blender, of course, is I have some reference images. Technically, you do not need these, but one of these is gonna be super useful. So we have this reference image just to kind of like look at what a Hershey Kiss looks like. I mean, for a lot of you, this is the closest you're ever gonna get to, looking at a kiss. So, look at it now. This is the Hershey Kiss, and then the other photo, this one is just for texture, right? Because we're going to be making not only the aluminum foil, but also this paper tag coming off of it. So it's nice to have a texture, okay? Okay, cool. So first thing we're going to do is set up our scene. So delete the cube and the light. We don't need them. The camera, arguably, we can keep since we want to do a render. And from the side view, I'm just going to look from here, you should be able to just take drag and drop reference immediately into here. Now, I don't know if this is a new feature or if this has been here for a long time, but I've only found out about it recently, so I'm kind of psyched about it. So reference, drag it in. If you don't have that, Shift-A, go to Image, Reference, and then you can import it in. So let's start off by modeling the Hershey Kiss thing, because I guess that's the main part of it. It kind of looks like a cylinder, so I'm going to start off with the cylinder, and with any object that kind of looks like this, in the sense that it's like rotationally symmetric. What does that mean? It means that it can be made from a cylinder. You want to use a cylinder to make that. So again, any object that's kind of circular based, and then it can shrink and grow, whatever, kind of like fences and stuff like that. Maybe fences aren't the best example. Anything that's kind of pole shaped, you can use a cylinder. Okay, we're going to go to wireframe mode so we can see what we're doing, make sure we're in edit mode, and just like, me in art class in second grade, we're going to be tracing. Why tracing? Because this is the easiest way to get like a reliable kind of mapping of this, right? We don't need to guess how wide it is at the bottom, etc. So the way I'm doing this, by the way, Control R to click. Control R is not to click. It's Control R to loop cut. You just click to confirm it, and then S to scale. And that's really all you need to do. A lot of modeling, the 3D modeler professionals don't want you to know this little dirty secret, but really most of their modeling is just tracing, assuming that they have reference. So I'm just going to select the top loop. That's Alt-click to do that. Scale that down, and it does kind of have like a curl to the left. And we can include that just with this. So we can do the rotation, the scaling all in here. And I know a lot of people in the comments, I read them occasionally. I pretend like I don't, but sometimes I read them. I know a lot of people in the comments are like, enable keys so you can see what I'm clicking. No, I understand why it's useful, but it's also a bit of a headache for me because I don't like the way it looks, and sometimes it doesn't work, and sometimes it does work. I've done it in the past. I'm just not a big fan. So make the shape of it, and so far you can see, since this is rotationally symmetric is the point, we're just getting a bunch of circles that we're stacking in a way that, looks like it's supposed to. We're just going to finish off the base, E to extrude, and that's just going to go down the Z-axis since we're looking at it directly from the Y view. Scale it, E, scale it, and that should be it. Now, ideally, you want to kind of space this out either, uniformly, so each one of these loops has the same height relative to another, or another way you can do this is the more detail there is in an area, like this area has a lot of changing curvature, you add a lot of segments. But you're going to notice that I'm not putting in too much detail in here, right? We're not like doing like 4 loop cuts just for the segment, because once we're done with this, and I'm going to say that we are done with it, you take it, let's see it in solid view, we're going to take this, move it to the side, we're going to take it and hit Control 1 or Control 2 or whatever, which is the shortcut for enabling or applying really subdivision surface of level 1 to whatever. So again, Control 3 is of level 3, etc. So I'm just going to do of level 1 or maybe 2 down the road. And you can see that this gives us a lot of the extra faces and geometry that we wouldn't want to do ourselves, because this already has a smoothing algorithm, baked into it. That's how it works. Okay. Only other thing we need to fix is because of subdivision surface and there was like a n-gon at the top, which you can think of as a triangle fan. So what I'm trying to say is it kind of looks like this to the subdivision surface or something like it, because we have these triangles or n-gons or whatever you have. Subdivision surface doesn't like that, so it creates this kind of stuff. Not a big deal. I mean, it's going to be small, so you don't see it anyways, but if you want to fix it, I to inset, and this is just going to add a bit of a buffer, and you can add a couple buffers. And this is just going to hide it pretty much, like, completely. And you can do the same thing on the bottom, although for this one, for real, you know, it's going to be on some kind of floor, so we're not going to see it. So take this, shade smooth, and that is the essence of the base. Now, of course, we're going to go back in here and kind of deform it, give it this crinkly shape, but what makes it look folded is not going to be geometry. It's actually going to be the material. We're going to do it procedurally, okay? So let's save this since, you know, we did some progress. I'm going to call it, you know, this blend is available on Patreon. Why do I call it that? I don't know. It's a surprise to me. Sometimes I get ideas from this abstract space and just bring them over here. We have the model, okay? Now let's do the aluminum foil kind of thing on it, right? Which you could either do with a cloth simulation with some complicated pressure settings, or we can just do it with a single material, which is what we're gonna do, okay? Rendered mode, first of all, we just need to set up our scenes, cycles, GPU, and I know you want me to go slower, but oh well. Film transparent, the reason I'm doing this, by the way, so that the background isn't visible. Why am I doing that? It's because the background, we're gonna load in an HDRI for lighting, and we don't wanna be able to see it, right? So world tab, background, you want to load in an HDRI, so that's just an environment texture, and I'm just gonna pick one that's kind of indoors, kind of outdoors, and has a lot to reflect, okay? So if we disable this, you can see we have this HDRI. Cool. Okay, so how do we make this look like aluminum foil? Well, I'm going to give you a couple guesses. So alum for not alumni, but aluminum foil, or not a luminance. It's for aluminum foil. The way you want to make this is you look at the material and you ask yourself, first of all, is it metallic? The answer is yes, so you make it metallic. Next, you ask yourself, is this thing shiny? Let's verify. Oh, yes, it is shiny. So because it's shiny, we take the roughness and bring it down. In other words, it's going to have less roughness. It's going to be smoother, the surface. So it's going to be more reflective. So in other words, low roughness means shinier, right? You could have a mirror if you go all the way down, right? So I'm just going to pick a level that kind of looks like it's roughly, you get it, roughly the same amount of reflectivity as this. And then finally, what's going to make this look like aluminum foil and not just like an aluminum, you know, turd. I don't know what this looks like, to be honest. Butt plug. What makes this look, you know, foily is a normal mapping or geometry, but we're going to do it via normal mapping. To do this, I'm just going to use Voronoi texture because right off the bat, especially if you set this to something like distance to edge, you can see this already has kind of a crinkly look to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to send it through a bump node. Bump node takes float information like this and converts it into normal information. So we're going to use this as a height map, which it's going to do some derivatives, blah, blah, blah. It's going to give us the normal map, okay? You take this, you connect it to the normal, and now let's see what our BSDF looks like. It kind of looks like hammered in, which, you know, kind of looks realistic, but we kind of have hammered in aluminum, right, instead of what we want. So a couple things we need to do to fix this. First of all, we could add in a bit of smoothing, which I think, yes, smooth F1, we already have a setting for that, so that's just going to make these ridges a bit smoother, which is perfect because it kind of looks like aluminum foil collapsing on itself. Next thing we can do is make the scale bigger, in other words, more detail. So 15 already adds in a bunch of detail. And lastly, to kind of mimic the simulation of if I was taking a piece of chocolate and wrapping aluminum foil over it, you're going to notice that the aluminum foil is smoothest on the bottom and it gets more wrinkled as we go up. And then that's just because of how they fold it over at the Hershey factory, at the Hershey slave factory, right? We can imitate that, but, you know, instead of hiring, you know, minimum wage labor, we can just do that with a couple nodes. So texture coordinates, we are going to use generated coordinates because if we separate by XYZ, you can see we get a gradient from left to right on x-axis, this way to this way on y-axis, but most importantly, z-axis bottom to top. So again, we're taking generated coordinates, which are coordinate system generated by the bounding box. Don't worry about it. Point is, if you look at z, it's going to give us 0 on the bottom, and then it goes up to 1. That's the gradient, okay? In other words, we now have a map, a gradient that we can use to, you know, kind of define or drive the scale, okay? So take this, plug it in here. You can see it's already kind of doing what we want, except you can't see it at all because we need to make it more intense. Again, this is a gradient going from 0 to 1, and at its maximum, remember before we had 15, so I'm going to multiply this by 15 just to gain intensity. Point is, you can see that as we move upwards, we're getting more dense or higher detail of folding, right? Because at the bottom we have 0, and then we make our way upwards, okay? And at this point, you can play around with a bunch of stuff. You know, the randomness, which you want to keep it at random. Smoothness, which you want to keep it smooth. Also, this maximum wrinkle value, which I guess 15 was roughly right. You can control a bunch of this, but what makes this look better than it does currently is you're going to see that this normal mapping, what gives it its folding, first of all, it needs some distortion. We'll do that. But second of all, it's a bit too strong. So take the strength of the thing that is converting this into a normal map and bring it down. And already it's looking a lot better. Not perfect, but better. Okay, let's add in a bit of distortion. So the way this is working right now is Voronoi texture is using some coordinate system. It happens to be generated coordinates. So you see if we plug this in, nothing changes. And then we did some math to drive the scale, right? So if we take the texture coordinates, again, what is mapping Voronoi texture onto this mesh? If we take it and distort it, well, then the Voronoi texture needs to be distorted. Here's the trick to, distort. And I think we might be distorting again in a bit, so I'm just going to quickly run through this just so you know. What you do is you take your coordinate system, you mix, use mix RGB. We're going to mix it with the noise texture. So if, in other words, we've taken our generated and now incorporated in or mixed some noise, and you want to set this to linear light. There's a reason for it, but don't worry about it. And what this setup basically gives us is and I know, I'm like, oh, don't worry about it. He knows all the secrets and he's never going to tell. Basically, linear light is a mathematical expression packed into, a single setting that blends these two perfectly. Don't worry too much about it, but even if you set this to mix, it looks fine, right? We're going to set it to linear light, and the nice thing about this is the factor is going to control how much distortion we have. So 0 is what we had before, as if this wasn't here, and then we can just add in a tiny bit of distortion, make the noise more detailed, and you can see that detail is what really makes this look like aluminum foil. Also, you could add in some roughness, although I'm not too sure. But actually, no, roughness seems to be exactly what we want. Roughness is going to make that distorting noise more rough. In other words, it's going to look more detailed, okay? So what's the point? The point is we've distorted this using linear lights, and all these things together are being sent through the bump node, and it looks kind of realistic. Only thing I would want is maybe I'm going to duplicate this. So I'm going to make a copy of this that doesn't have the distorted coordinates, and let's add this back in. So now I'm adding in more bump in some sense, and we can actually add in a scale value. So if we multiply only this version, this is what's going to be scaled up, not the noisy thing. This is just so we have our low resolution detail, and this is just to add in a bit of high resolution detail, those big folds that we care about. And we can actually, and let's make sure we're using the same scale thing as before, we can actually change the multiplier here if we want, but in general, I'm pretty happy with this. So let's make it slightly less intense, okay? Maybe even less intense. There we go. This is all an experimenting thing. So what have we done? We've made noise, we've added in more noise, added them, and contributed it all to a bump node that is making a normal mapping. Okay, cool. So this is the base of our aluminum foil. Anything else you want to play with is all like metallic values, the color of the aluminum. But again, the most important part of this is this bump node, okay? Now, at this point, we could start sculpting in additional detail. So you can see this gives us a good start. And it's all procedural, so no matter how we distort this mesh, right, we grab this, and I'm just going to pick an edge and scale it using proportional editing. No matter what we do, no matter how dummy thick we make this thing, it's going to work out with the aluminum foil, okay? That's the key takeaway. But eventually, we're going to want to add in more geometry. Before we do that, let's actually add in this tag just so we can, get past that part. To do this, I'm going to add in a plane, making sure that it's spawned in a, orientation where it's viewing us. And then you just kind of position it in the right place, and you scale it down in edit mode. We don't need proportional editing for this. I'm just going to roughly model this thing as I am with, the rest of this. I'm just going to make this thing that's sticking out, and we want to make sure it's kind of chopping this halfway through as if it's, going through there. So you just want it to kind of chop it this way. And by the way, if you don't want this distortion as you scale on the x-axis after you rotate, set to local coordinates. That's a tiny little trick. What was the point? The point is we have this. we take it, we're going to add in some loop cuts. Why? Because this is going to give us the additional geometry we need so that when we proportional edit, we can kind of distort the shape. I'm just going to roughly mimic the shape here, nothing too insane. So G to move, scale this up, something like that. Yeah, it doesn't need to be the exact same orientation. And the other thing that's going to make this look real is we rotate it on the Z-axis. And this is a nice way with proportional editing to add in some very quick twist, okay? So this is our tag. We want to give it a material. This one's actually going to be a lot faster and simpler than the aluminum foil because, again, we are going to be using, and since I have this image, an image texture. By the way, all of this is going to be available on the Patreon, and I know some of you guys aren't on Patreon. You could either join, or I'm sure there's textures of this available, or you could just write a piece of text that says kisses and then an R for really good kisses. I don't know. What was the point? The point is we just take this image, we drag it in. I guess we need to make a material first. We drag it in. And then we're just going to map it so that it's correct on this tag, okay? No need to do any cloth simulation or any of that nonsense. So take this, we're going to send it through base color. So now this is the texture that's being shown through. It's going to try to kind of compress all this image as if we put it on a plane and then squished it and rotated it and everything. We only want part of the image, okay? To do this, we just need to mess with, again, since this texture, by default, even if it's not showing it, it's using UV coordinates, right? All we need to do is go to go to the UV editor, select all of these, and also, I guess before we do this, by the way, I'm just going to add in a bit more distortion. So now I'm adding in loop cuts this way, and I'm just going to take parts of this and like move the vertices just so there's a bit of wiggle, even though this is a pretty rigid piece of paper. None of this affects the UV map is the point. Once we are ready, we select all the faces. You're going to see it's showing up in the UV editor. And again, since this is tied to UV coordinates, this image, this is what it's using to map. Anything that we do here is going to affect the image. So I think we need to scale down on the x-axis. It's kind of hard to tell which way. We might need to do some rotation or something like that. Yeah. So first of all, we're going to rotate it by 90 degrees. Why are we doing that? And let's disable proportional editing so that the kisses text flows along here instead of going the other way. So this is before, this is after. And now we scale on the y-axis, I believe. And we might need to do an inversion or something. But you can see we're taking this UV island and basically mapping it to this image, which means it's going to flow along here, especially once we make it look nicer. So let's do that. So I'm just going to do this, a bit of rotation, a little bit of this. And this is a nice way to work because all we need to do is use a single reference image, and then we can send it through a bunch of BSDF nonsense, right? So you can see now this is mapped pretty properly. It's going with the distortion because, again, the UV map doesn't have this kind of bending to it. Now, this isn't identical to this version because this seems to only have one kisses written on it. We could try doing that, but in general, we don't have the perfect image for this, so you just kind of use one island. Although it kind of looks all right. I think this is okay. So I'm just going to take it like this and like that. And you could spend a lot of time making this accurate is the point, but it looks pretty okay. You want to make sure that the margins here, especially this one here, isn't cast in shadow because that's going to make it look weird. So I'm just going to make it look roughly good enough. It's a tutorial. Doesn't need to be perfect, okay? So now you can see we have the kisses text flowing along here. And because this is only a single node in our material, there's no reason we can't add in more stuff. So just like last time, this time we'll do it faster. Let's add in a bit of bump. This time we're trying to simulate paper crinkling, not aluminum foil. So I'm going to do it a bit differently. Noise texture, we send it through a bump node. Again, why do we do this? We do it not because, we feel an obligation to, or our country says it's mandatory military service. No, you take this, you send it through height. What the fuck was I telling? I was saying that the bump node converts height information into normal information was the point. We're going to connect this here. To make this look a bit better, what I would recommend is I'm going to take the scale, bring it down. This is just going to make it so there's less ripples. And you can see it's already kind of looking like paper distorting. I'm going to make it even less intense. And then for the strength, we're going to turn it down. Okay? So here's the before and the after. It's subtle, so let's make it less subtle. It is subtle, but it adds in quite a bit of realism, I think. Okay, we have paper. Paper is kind of rough, not too rough, but kind of rough. So I'm just going to increase it like this. And then also, we do have a bit of translucency, I believe. I mean, it's very thin paper, so light should be going through it. I guess there's a couple ways to do it. Kind of the cheap way is you take the alpha, you bring it down, so it's literally going to make it transparent, kind of. So if you set it to something like 0.9, that might be the way to go. It's not physically accurate. Another way is transmission, although it doesn't seem to work with our material as is, and usually that's because of roughness and stuff like that. So it's going to look like very rough glass as is. But you could turn it into glass is the point. Maybe the way we should do it, if we do it at all, is do something like a translucency BSDF. We mix these together, and then, as long as we use the same color here, just to drive this, we should be able to switch from one to the other. So this is the BSDF. This is the translucent version. Maybe we'll just set it to 0.8 or something, okay? It might add in a bit of realism. I don't know. We could also do this via Subsurface, by the way. The whole point of this is if I was to put in a light behind the Hershey Kiss, so I'm going to put in a light here and bring it up just so it's right behind and make it a very intense, so something like 100 or 1,000, we'd want the light to kind of pass through it. So I'm seeing that, even though this might be technically the more accurate way to do it, I think I want to do it with Subsurface. So just add in a bit of Subsurface. Not too much, but just a tiny bit. Is this technically accurate? I don't know. But you can see it's actually responding to light. And we can actually say that when it does do that, make it a tiny bit reddish or orange or something like that. It's kind of like that light effect that you see through your palm if you put a flashlight on it. That's the point. We can make it more intense just to see it. Yeah, now you're starting to see it a bit. It adds in a bit of render time, but whatever. So you can choose whether or not you want to do your subsurface on the tag. Okay, we've been digressing for quite a while now. So we have the tag, we have the aluminum foil. Let's incorporate them a bit more because you can see what makes this look real is the aluminum foil, because it's real. You know, somebody literally wrapped a piece of chocolate. It's bending and folding on this. Of course, we can't do that without simulating, but we can roughly get it with modeling. So let's do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to sculpting, and this is, you know, we do this because it's easy to model here. Remember that this is our geometry. It's very basic. What makes it look smooth is this subdivision surface. I'm going to set this to 2, add in a couple loop cuts around this area. Okay, that should be good. And then I'm going to apply this. We apply it because now when we modify this, we actually have control over all the faces. They exist. Before, when we had this is what our geometry looked like. So we can't actually do too much. So I'm going to apply this, and we want to go back into sculpting mode. So if you're ever out of sculpt mode, just click this. And now we just want it to wrap around. I don't know what brush is ideal, maybe clay or clay strips. Just pick one and start like modeling it so it kind of folds over on this area. Maybe clay strips is the way to go. So do some there. We can also do some kind of like a low resolution detail just so it's not perfect. So I'm bringing down the strength, and I'm just painting some random areas here. If you hold control as you do this, then it eats in instead of eating outward. So we can just kind of make some areas that's higher strength. We can make some areas that are eating in, some areas that are eating out. And we could add in more topology and stuff like that, but let's not get crazy here. We just want it to look like there's a bit more interaction going on here than there was before. Add in a couple more wrinkles and crinkles and stuff like that. We can also decimate this later, and let's see what that looks like. There we go. So you can see now there's a bit more interaction that makes it look like one kind of merges into the other, kind of, okay? Again, the reason we did this is so that they interact in some sense. And now that I'm looking at this, by the way, I think I'm going to, for our purposes, you can do it if you want, but I'm going to disable subsurface because it's not really adding too much. But technically, you want to add in a bit of that. Okay, so we've done our sculpting, we've done the thing. Let's do a bit of decimation because right now, I think we have statistics somewhere. Statistics. We have a lot of faces, 1,000, 3,800 of triangles. That's a lot of faces for just a tiny Hershey Kiss. The paper's doing all right. There's not too many faces, but this is too much. So let's throw in a decimate modifier. Decimate is going to basically take our geometry and try to make it look very, very similar, keeping the UV map, but also bringing down the face count. So this is what we have originally. We bring this down. You see we're getting less and less faces, and you can kind of see the geometry's shifting a bit, because it needs to kind of get rid of some detail, right, if it's to do this. But here's the before and after. There isn't too much of a change, so I think something like this is fine. We've already cut it in half, more than half. Apply this, and now you can see everything's working fine. And even if it did manipulate the UV map, which I don't think it does, doesn't matter since none of this is UV dependent, only the tag is. Okay, cool. What next? What next is we take this, and what we want to do is join them into a single Hershey Kiss. Okay, so this is our basic Hershey Kiss model. And just to kind of wrap up this tutorial, because, you know, you wrap up a Hershey Kiss, just to kind of wrap this up, what's going to make this look real, and again, right now what we have is like a 3 meter or 2 meter tall Hershey Kiss, so it's not going to look real. Usually you're used to seeing it so small that almost anything you do is going to look realistic. So again, you want to have it stand up to scrutiny, but again, you're never going to see it this big. Let's just make it smaller for reference. Object, set origin to geometry, just so it's centered. Just gonna make a tiny little Hershey Kiss, kind of like more of the scale you'd see it. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this and I'm just gonna make a basic scene. So add in a plane. This is just so it has something to sit on, and there's gonna be shadows, reflections. Remember, we have aluminum foil, so anything we do is gonna reflect and add in a bit of realism. I'm going to take this, I'm going to select these two edges and bring them up to just kind of create a stage here. You select these 3 faces, bevel, and this is just like a quick way to set up a background without too much work, and we just need to extend this, right? So select these edges, move them on the y-axis, I suppose, and then this one on the x-axis, and then the top ones on the what? On the z-axis. There we go. So now you can see we have a Hershey Kiss and Oblivion, kind of like when Squidward was all alone, you know, that kind of thing. Or my viewers young? You know, I looked at analytics recently. I know, total side digression. I was looking at analytics recently, and it looks like my average viewer is roughly my age, 20-something. So you guys understand the references. We do have a couple 80-year-olds. Hello. You know, I'm not making fun of you. We want you here. It's really the 9-year-olds, and I know there's some here that bother me a little, but whatever. And anybody who watches this is fine with me. We have a Hershey Kiss. We have a basic plane. Let's center our camera a bit, so I'm just going to zoom in just a little. Again, I'm going to keep it very small in frame, and there we go. Final thing, if you want to not be in this white oblivion, just take this, and we are going to make the base color lower. And just so you don't see kind of this curvature, even though we made it shade smooth, bring up the roughness. And that should help, or not the specular, the roughness. And that should help hide it a bit. Although, I do like the look of either something very close to black or very close to white. So something like that should be pretty good. And at this point, you can just take your Hershey Kiss, duplicate it, rotate it, call it a different one. And if you want the tag to be different, you just hop into edit mode. Again, the UV coordinates are still going to be there. So all we need to do is proportional edit, and we can get different kinds of tags, which is also going to move the Hershey Kiss base, which is good because these are supposed to connect. So, I mean, the rest of this is lighting, shit like that, but in essence, this is how you make a realistic Hershey Kiss. At least it really stands up to scrutiny from this far away. When it's like, 3 meters tall, I don't know, but... there you go. So hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial. Welcome to the end of the show. This is called the after show. Or no, there's a name for this. The after party? I don't know. Point is, everybody who's invited to the party, they're on the list to the right. No, this is a list of patrons, people who decided to donate to both this channel and the CG Matter channel. And maybe donation isn't the right word because they're getting stuff in exchange. So all these patrons are getting early access to tutorials. So you better bet your bippy that this tutorial was uploaded early. They saw it before you guys. That's why sometimes there's comments that are like 30 hours ago or whatever. They have access to it. Also, what else? Exclusive tutorials that are not posted on either channel. So soon my CG Matter video that I've been working on for a while, it's going to be uploaded, and I'm going to make a tutorial series on that. That's going to be exclusive. Tutorials you can't get anywhere else. They're going to be on Patreon, Discord access, behind the scenes. Again, any blend file I've ever uploaded, including this one, once I, clean it up a bit. Blend files are going to be available, stuff like that. So if any of this interests you, there's a link in the description for Patreon, although you don't need it, right? The information, you've already watched the video. It exists. It's just a little something bonus if you either want to get any of those benefits, or maybe you just want to support either of those channels. I want to say thank you to all 670 some. We're almost at 700 patrons, which is it's a bit absurd. But thanks to all of you. And at this point, I think I'm going to take my leave because my throat, my voice, my vocal cords have certainly taken their leave. I've enjoyed this tutorial, but all good things end like this. Bye.